to say. All right, welcome everybody. I've got another masterclass video. I've done I think two of these. The last one I remember really well was with Kyle in the Fury Road and like kind of deck building tips and tricks. But this time is Archimago, the Mr. Magoo Banana Man. But I've gotten I think one of the best Archimago players in Sorcery currently, Geoffrey. Why don't you say hello and we can get started on how you build Archimago.
Hello, hello. Happy to be here.
So, I've been wanting to do this for a minute, but I didn't feel like I was strong enough in Archimago to say this with any confidence. But in the last month and a half, I've really ground out some games and things have started to click. But you were mentioning on how you build Archimago and how you think of the matchup or the deck as a whole. Did you want to get started on, I guess, card draw and cantrips and where you first start with Archimago?
Yeah. Yeah, I think what we're going to do is we're going to talk through like 4 or 5 big categories of cards that you'll always find in the Magoo deck and roughly which cards belong to which categories and how you think about every piece of your Archimago deck. I guess the first thing I'll mention is, while I appreciate the intro, I'm actually not a really good brewer. And so I really stand on the shoulder of giants here. I think some people have done the early work on Magoo, and I kind of like jumped on and fine-tuned my own version of it. But I definitely can't take credit for that. And so I have a pretty good understanding of like the anatomy of an Archimago deck, and I can talk about my vision when I try and do some changes to my own list. And really, it boils down to you really have 5, maybe 6 big categories when it comes to Archimago cards, and the first one we'll talk about, and probably one of the ones that is very specific to Archimago, is card draw, right? So most Archimago decks will always have at least 8 cards that we generally call cantrips. So cantrips are cards that replace themselves in the sense that they'll make you draw a card, right? And so I think the two most common are Blink and Common Sense. And they replace themselves, they make you draw a card. But in any other deck, it's not card draw, it's not card advantage.
I was gonna, I
You
was,
spent a card.
I was gonna
Yeah.
say, I wasn't sure to where to put common sense in this whole stack of groups. In Archimago, common sense is a third of a card, right? It's not a
Yeah,
replacement.
exactly.
Yeah.
Well, it replaces itself, right? And quite literally, people will common sense for common sense, so it literally replaces itself. Um, but the strength of Archimago is that that adds 1 card into your graveyard. And if you look at Archimago's ability, that's an extra third of a card. So really, when you're common sensing in Archimago, you're not spending a card to get a card. You're spending a card to get 1.33 of a card. And so that's like very small incremental card draw, but card draw nonetheless. And you want a critical number of cantrips in Archimago because they're going to help recast from the graveyard your other big cards, the more impactful stuff that you want to be able to recast. Blinks and Common Sense are very popular for versions of Archimago that don't play air. You also have access to Mad Dash. You have it on the list here. Power of Flight is a popular option. Riptide if you're in water. And then Pendragon Legacy, which is a unique, but essentially does the same thing as the other one, just for 1 mana cheaper. And then obviously we wouldn't talk about card draw without having the Grandmaster Wizard. Yeah, so if you're in Air in Archimago, drawing 3 is everything you want to be able to do. So I'll talk about the Kettletop Leprechaun a little bit later.
Okay, I wasn't.
They do.
This was another one I wasn't sure about because it says draw a sight, but I treat our Kettletop as an extra card that I get to
Yeah.
an extra spell. So I wasn't sure if this like it's not really the cantrip card advantage, but is a card advantage card in my head no matter what.
That is correct. I mean, I'll spoil my my opinion of the Kettletop, but basically they're going to be in almost all categories, and so they have their own category that's like multi-purpose, and surprisingly, they only share that category with the ring. So that's a pretty high honor to be among the ring in your category, I guess. But these guys are fantastic. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. And then so
So
like
card draw. Card draw's
yeah.
the first big section, basically.
And so sorcery right now, card draw is a huge premium. Like before Archimago came around, we saw Death Speaker with Apprentice Wizards and Land Surveyors, and those were the card advantage engines of Death Speaker. And essentially, that's what Archimago is doing, but different. And we're doing it with spells, and we get to recast the spells. And I feel like doing it with a 2 mana spell like Power Flight is infinitely better than doing it with a 3 mana minion that does it.
Yeah, absolutely. Also, like obviously you're looking for spells for Archimago, and you'll notice that like all of these bring you a little something, right? Like they're not just literally discard this card, draw another card. That wouldn't be super interesting. Blink allows you to reposition, and that might be important in certain matchups. Common sense might get you a specific card. It's not just drawing on the top of your deck. You might actually be able to fetch something that you're in need at the time. So they'll bring you their little version of something, but really they're all grouped together because they're cantrips, and you need a certain amount to make the deck really works.
That's
I think I'm usually on 8, and sometimes I'll push it up a little bit.
yeah. I was gonna ask where at what threshold do you like start seeing I need more cantrips? So I'm like at like 10. I think is what I'd be happy at, but I think I'm also running more like card advantage minions like Kettle Top. But I think I have 8 cantrips if you would like want to put them in
Yeah.
that category.
Yeah, I think the standard, if you're looking at a list that's in air and earth, the standard is 4 common sense, 4 blinks, and 1 Pendragon Legacy.
Mm-hmm.
And then you'll see lists that add a couple power flights on top. But I think the bare minimum is 8, 9, and it's usually Legacy, Blink, and Common Sense.
Yeah.
And then if you're not in these colors, you try to replicate that ratio with the other ones at your disposal. So Mad Dash in fire, Riptide in water. Riptide is basically your Blink if you're in water but not in air, which is an option for Archimago. So yeah.
There's also what's the hook one? It's another water card.
Oh yeah. Harpoon something?
Yeah, harpoons. It's somewhere in here. Yeah, fire harpoons is another.
There we go.
Kind of like if you're in water and you need a couple more cantrips. Yeah, it doesn't do as good as Riptide, but it's still a functionally a cantrip. But
Yeah, I think if I would probably put this one as like last on the list
yeah,
for me. I can't remember the wording, but there might be a.
you have to
Trying to
target
remember. Yeah,
a water site. Yeah.
or target minion above or below an adjacent water site. So it's
Oh,
quite.
okay. So there's a conditional draws. You have to have a minion
Yeah,
there. Okay.
correct.
But
Whereas
Riptide
Blink
and
or
Blink
Power of Flight, because they don't.
or Mad
I think
Dash.
Power of Flight doesn't target, so you can just always cast them.
Yeah.
Always cast
These
them.
are always cantrips. Okay.
Yeah, exactly. If you don't have a minion, you can still cast Power of Flight just to draw. You won't get the extra benefit of the airborne, but that's fine. Sometimes you just want to like fill your graveyard and replace your card.
Any other last points about cantrips?
No, I mean I think it's common sense for common sensing is one of the classic Magoo plays, and it might seem silly at first, but it's actually really really good because you're just getting incremental value. And then obviously Grandmaster Wizard, once you feel a bit stabilized, like drawing 3 for 6 is the par for sorcery card advantage, but it's something we are always happy to see as control. So especially when a lot of your spells are pretty cheap, you might be able to like Grandmaster and cast something in the same turn, something that you just drew. So
Yeah.
it's
And
pretty good.
I will say a tip about the common sense is don't get too high on the common sense for common sense train. It's good. Don't get me wrong. It's very good. But sometimes there's better things to be doing than common sense for common sense and being proactive.
Yeah, that's right. I think judging your position in the game decides whether you common sense for common sense or if you need to be a bit more, hands-on and like grab an answer or maybe a blank because common sensing for common sensing doesn't really let you see new cards.
Yeah, if you can, we'll get to the when you want to do things, but that's my
Yeah.
point there. And then the next category you had here is the survival cards.
Yeah.
These are the big one here is divine healing. Healing for 14 for 2 mana is a huge, like, I'm staying around for at least 2 more turns kind of thing. So, what do you have about survival?
Yeah. Yeah, so obviously Archimago tend to be control decks. Some versions are a bit more like mid-rangey in the sense like they can actually be the aggressor in the mid game. But by default, you're gonna be weathering the storm, trying to manage the board, and once you feel stable, then you're gonna turn around the corner, right? And so it's very likely you're gonna take damage early because you're not, well, first of all, you're not playing to the board much, and your opponent presumably will. And then as a control deck, you're answering threats from your opponent, right? But that means usually by the time you're removing one of their threat, that threat might have already provided something. And that can be damage through, Violent and Kobolds that do damage the turn they enter, or any charge minion that will get a chance to attack you before you can answer it. So as a result, you're going to want to survive in the early stages of the game until you feel stable enough that you can turn the corner and be the one kind of like being the aggressor, basically. So in survival, I'll do a section for removal specifically after. I think what I want to see in survival is mostly healing. So Angel's Egg, obviously great example. I think almost all Archimago decks play Angel's Egg. And Divine Healing, right? Divine Healing is one of the cards that's been debated. It's like, is it too good? Should it be unique like the other cards in the 1 mana 3 threshold cycles? Gain 7 life. It's obviously pretty good, but when you're able to recast it in the same turn, which is pretty easy to do when it's a 1 mana spell, it's really gained 14, and that can be going from I'm almost at door to I'm back at 20, like everything's fine. And this can get you more time to find the answers, or after you've answered the board, it can just reset you at 20, right? So a play you'll see is maybe on 6 mana, you go Poison Nova and then Divine Healing. And then all of a sudden, there's no more board and you're on 10, 15, potentially 20, right? And then it feels like you're starting the game over, except you have 6 mana. A lot of your cards, the big hitters cost a lot of mana, whereas your opponent's deck might be on the lower curve. And so obviously you feel favored when you're in that position. But I'll also put the token makers in that category because surviving is not just healing, it can be preventing the damage before it even happens. And for Archimago, one way to do that is creating tokens. And so obviously in other decks, you could prevent damage by playing your own minions. Archimago, if you can play minions through magic spells, it's added benefit, right? Because you can recast them later. And so Border Militia and Guards are basically your quote-unquote minions, but through magic spells. And then they do a great job at like saving your life by blocking some of the bigger attacks from your opponent.
Yeah, you can kind of think of a token where I think this concept of tokens is a life gain or protecting is through the simple villages. I used to play Holy Ground a lot in the early because it was like, I get to gain 3 life. But what if I played a simple village and paid 1 mana and blocked a unicorn? So I essentially saved 4 life. So that's where like the tokens can be really good, and blocking and preventing damage can be kind of thought of as also life gain.
Yeah. And this is where we talked about the leprechaun already, right? But the leprechaun would also be in this category because it does exactly that. You're very happy to throw a leprechaun onto a Lagbog cat attack. Like, yeah, you lose a unit, but you get your card back and it basically saved your life. So expect the leprechaun to be in multiple categories, and we've already seen them in 2 so far.
Yeah.
Um, I'll also put the token makers in that category because surviving is not just healing. So Angel's Egg, obviously great example. I think I'll talk about the vampire in a sec. Something that you mentioned that's very important in building Archimago, and this doesn't really apply to the card draw category, so I think it's natural that it comes up here. You can see there's another lens to use when looking at your cards, and it's proactive versus reactive, right? So Divine Healing is obviously a great survival spell, but it's a reactive spell. It doesn't do anything if you're already on 20. You first need to, have been dealt damage to be able to Divine Heal back up, right? And we see this in healing. We will see this in other categories as well, so we might as well mention it now. You want to have, obviously the reactive spells tend to do more than the proactive spells, but it's important that you keep a balance of proactive and reactive spells for both categories. So Angel's Egg and Border Militia Guards, I would put in the proactive category because
proactively
they do survival things.
Proactively preventing damage. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, so you can Border Militia when you're on 20. You don't need to have taken damage already in order to save your life later, right? And this is really important in the way you manage your mana. If all of your survival spells were divine healing type spells, you'd always feel like you're answering, which is fine, you're a control deck. But what if you have nothing to answer? Are you just gonna, pass the turn with 4 mana up just because the full of your hand is reactive
to do,
spell
so.
and you have nothing
Yeah.
to react? Yeah. And so Angel's Egg, Border Militia, Guards, etc., and even the Vampire, right, in the category, are things that contribute to your survival and will eventually heal your life, but they're things that you can play on an empty board, and that's very, very important.
I know
you're always happy to slam an Angel's Egg on 3, even if you're already at 20. It will do its thing later.
And especially if you don't have the pressure and you have the room to play an Angel's Egg, you can be proactive for the future. If they play a 3 mana or 2 mana power thing and then they attack you, your Angel's Egg either makes that 1 damage or no damage. So you proactively dealt with their minion that they're going to play in 3 turns. The other thing here, I put it into survival, but you also have in lock pieces, which is true for both. A turn 2 Perilous Bridge is just like preventing damage for the first 2 or 3 turns. And I kind of see that as a piece to Archimago survival is avoiding that early rush, that like 2 mana horse into 3 mana cat, and kind of like, oh crap, now there's 6 damage on board and I have nothing to do. I'm still 2 mana away from my Poison Nova or something like that. So a lot of these defensive sites can help bridge that early turn.
Yeah, I think if we extend this to the water list, I think you'd have Troll Bridge in there as well. Troll Bridge is one of those cards that is really good early on. It loses a bit of value later on because they can just pitch an extra site or something that they might have in hand. But in the early game, it basically is a Perilous Bridge. They often won't walk into it. The only caveat is if they play Warhorse, that's a bit awkward. But
yeah. Last points on survival cards. How many survival cards, or like what's your general split between proactive and reactive survival cards? I think it's about 50-50.
Yeah, well, you'll always want 3 Divine Healing, most likely. It's one of the key card in Archimago in that it is very cheap and it's one of the swingiest. You'll always want the Angel Egg. I think most people will always play almost a playset of Leprechaun, at least 3 or 4. So these are pretty much mainstay. The Vampire, we'll talk about
that's
3 different archetypes for Archimago, but it's not always there. And then the tokens, I think, are getting more and more popular, especially recently.
Yeah, I think tokens is the new Archimago list that is going to terrorize things. But next is lock pieces. I don't have a whole lot of things in here. I probably can keep adding more as we talk about them. But
and they could almost be. They could almost be merged with survival. I'm not sure. This part is a bit trickier. Basically, it's things that are gonna severely limit the options for your opponent. And so in there I have chains, I have root spider, I have a lot of the sites as well. basically you want to be able to put. So first of all, you need to be able to put something down proactively, right? Chains and root spider are things that you can put down on an empty board that will still be valuable for, I guess, managing your opponent's minions later on. And same for the sites. And again, there are ways that you can use your mana, even if you don't have anything to like answer to the board just yet. And they provide you repeated, I guess, not card advantage, but they provide you repeated, I guess, defensive options, basically. Whereas like a Divine Healing is going to be a one-time use. Angel Egg, doesn't do anything if you're on 20 or if they're going to set up for an Alpha Strike. So they do something a little bit differently, but they're not that different from the survival category.
I've talked to Moth a lot, and he's compared at least the defensive sites like Gnome Hollows and Perilous Bridge to counters in other games. These are free counters to your opponent's minions. If you have two Perilous Bridges right next to each other and then a Gnome Hollows, your opponent's minions are going to have a hard time doing anything. So you've effectively removed them from the game. Yes, you're in, like, say, Magic, you're playing a counter spell, but those counters are now on sites and has a long-running effect that you don't have to spend a card for. You're just playing a site. That's what makes these defensive sites or prison sites so punishing to your opponents, is that it prevents them from playing their minions effectively, just as a counterspell would say, no, you don't get to play your minion. Gnome Hollow says, no, your 4 powers or 3 powers don't get to do anything. They are counters on a site.
They're here to limit your opponent's options. Yeah. You can't play anything during their turn, but if you have chains, you're still taking quote-unquote actions during their turn, because when they draw, something will happen, right? Mm-hmm. And Root Spider says, well, I can't play during your turn, but I know for sure that, like, while my Root Spider stands, nothing is happening on that side. And same goes with Gnome Hollows, Pebble Pass, etc. So it's the closest we have to interacting within our opponent's turns. It's limiting the number of options that are going to be available to them when they do take their turn.
Makes sense. You want to go to removal now?
Yeah. So obviously, as a control deck, your opponent is going to present threats, and you're going to want to answer them over and over and over again until they run out of gas. And that is when you can start feeling a bit more stable. Hopefully you've healed, etc., and then you can start turning the corner. But removal is probably the majority of an Archimago deck. Actually, I didn't check the numbers. That might not be true because of just how many cantrips we run. But it feels like the things that we're looking for.
You always have removal, right? Like, yeah, you play it once, but you have it again. So you have twice the amount of removal that you see in the deck, essentially.
That's right. Because often these are the cards that you're going to recast from your graveyard. It feels like this is what we have the most of in the deck, even though it might not actually be true, like, numbers-wise. So you can have, like, early removal. So these would be lightning bolts, magic missiles, bury is obviously a great one. I think it might not be in the list. You'll have a more expensive removal that tend to do more than 1-for-1. So we're looking at removal. As soon as you cross the 4 or 5 mana mark, I want my removal to do more than 1-for-1. And a great example of that would be, Earthquake or Poison Nova on 5 is like a critical turning point in the game if you have it. Poison Nova can kill, obviously, many units. Same for Earthquake. Chaos Twister and Infiltrate, they're 1 mana cheaper, but they have the potential to be more than 1-for-1. Chaos Twister, I think you have already in the list, but if you're lucky on TTS or if you're good at it on paper, you can usually kill multiple units with it.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to start
and Infiltrate.
Start practicing with the Twister. I don't think I've ever played it on paper.
This card's so good on paper, it's crazy. I think I have a personal rule that if Twister is legal at a tournament, I need to play a deck that has 2 Twister in it, just because it's too good. And Infiltrate will only get rid of 1 unit, but because you basically get that unit, it's not a 1-for-1. It's a 1-for-0 in the sense that you spend a card, you get rid of 1 of their card, and you get a card back, which is their card. So I see Infiltrate as not a 1-for-1. It's a weird 1-for-0 essentially. And Craterize, it's obviously the big one. I think it's the finisher spell for Magoo, and we'll talk about how, Magoo actually deals damage, because you'll notice that for now in all of the categories, the goal has been to stay alive and not really turn the corner. But Craterize is probably one of those like iconic Magoo card. And then more recent additions in auras and minions, which might feel a bit counterintuitive because you don't get the benefit of the Archimago ability for these, but they're just too good. They're just too good to pass up. Black Plague, Great Famine, Death Dealer, and Titan, I think to a lesser extent.
I
think
I like Titan.
The big advantage, yeah, well, the big advantage for Black Plague, Famine, and Death Dealer that Titan doesn't have is that they actually get rid of things that are a bit harder to reach usually. I'm thinking through Void minions for Death Dealer. I'm thinking through Burrowed minions for or Submerge for Black Plague and Famine. Whereas Titan is still only going to kill on the surface, which is good.
Titan just you might get lucky and remove 2 things if they pile up, but generally you're killing 1 thing, and it's more of a gotcha if you come to my sites.
Yeah, that's right.
It's not
Death Dealer, Famine, Plague. Just they get everything.
Titan is you talked about having dual uses for your cards. I feel like Titan is a removal card and a threat card, so that's kind of why I like it's a dual purpose card. I think Death Dealer, Famine, and Plague are better removal spells as a whole, but I include in Titan just because it does fill that role sometimes.
Yeah, for sure. I think you've touched on something that we'll talk about in a sec. I just want to finish the last category, but we went through cards, and some people might be screaming at their screen like, "Oh no, Border Militia is not a survival card. This is your finisher spell in Archimago, etc., etc." And this is true, but I think it's important to get in the mindset that a lot of your cards, if they can do multiple things, the first thing you should think of them doing is the survival and removal and control piece before the damage piece.
Yep.
So Lightning Bolt is a great example. We have it here on the page, right? I think up until you feel like you're stable in the game and you're in a good position, you control the board, etc., players shouldn't think of Lightning Bolt as something that can go face and can deal damage to your opponent.
If you're playing Lightning Bolt on 2 as Archamago on the play, do not shoot them in the face with Lightning Bolt. It is a removal spell for the first 6 to 7 turns of the game. You need to not die. That's the main goal of Archamago in the beginning.
That's right. And there's multiple ways you can deal damage in Archimago, but the beauty of it is a lot of those cards do something else than just dealing damage. Mm-hmm. Lightning Bolt can deal damage when you're ready for Lightning Bolt to deal damage, but most often it's going to be a removal in the early game. If we go back in some of the previous category in survival, we had Vampire. Yeah, Vampire is a great blocker, but eventually when you feel stable and you're not that interested in the lifelink or the block aspect, you just attack with it and it can deal damage. Same for the Militia, same for the Guards, same for the Leprechaun, again, in another category. But it's important that all of these cards do their defensive thing first, if you need them to, before you think of them as aggressive options. Because that's how sometimes you can lose a game in Archimago, is trying to turn the corner a little bit too quickly when you're not fully stable and using some of those modal cards in the wrong way.
I don't appreciate the personal attack, Geoffrey. Yeah.
Happened once, Riss. You're fine.
No, I do it all the time. It's my main crux as Archamago.
You're an aggro player at heart.
I'm a mid-range player at heart. I want to be a Timmy and play a unicorn and punch you on turn 5.
Yeah. The last category we have, which we called threats here, and maybe we remove Border Militia and Guards and Craterize from it, because I think what I would want to do here is actually keep this section. I want it to be the damage only cards. Yeah, Yeah, the damage only or silver bullet cards. Basically, the cards that do not give you any survival or removal or almost defensive options, and are only here as like your way to close the game faster. And this category is something you want to keep very, very low in your Archimago deck. It's extremely powerful. We've all seen the double gigantism for, plus 12 damage with 8 mana. Often, if your opponent sees Archimago on 8 mana, they'll think about Credit Rise and they'll go, oh, I just need to be above 10. But Gigantism double cast is actually more than Credit Rise, and so that can surprise people. But Gigantism doesn't do a whole lot more, right? Like, yeah, you could cast it on a minion and eat a bigger minion, but it's so dependent on other things that I see Gigantism as like, this is my damage only spell. And when I build it in Archimago, I'm like, okay, I can't afford 6 of these types of cards that only close the game, because the way you lose as Archimago is you draw these cards that do only one thing, and that one thing is not what you need at the moment. Boudica and Ruler, for the versions of Archimago that are a bit more token heavy, Boudica's great, right? You need what? 6 tokens, right? 6, yeah, even less, right? 5 tokens that can attack, and you're good to go. But if you don't have the tokens yet, Boudica doesn't do much. Actually, doesn't do anything. And same for Ruler to some extent, right? Like, yeah, Ruler can actually go and charge into a minion that like annoys you.
Yeah,
and
but you're
okay
also
sacrificing
you're paying 4
Yeah.
mana to do that. Like,
That's right.
it just gets a little expensive.
I would put in this. I'd put Feast for Crows in this category. It's defensive in a way because you actually remove threats proactively from your opponent's deck, but it's one of those cards that, like, if you have too many of those cards in your opening hand, like, you don't feel good as Archimago. If I have Feast for Crow and Gigantism in my first 3 cards, I'm like, oh, that's gonna be a rough game. I could very well see losing that one.
Yep.
Feast for Crow is not really something you can cast on 3. It's really something that can kill the game against certain matchups. Like, removing 2 cards from their decks can be game in things like the mirror match or stuff like that.
I was going to say, Feast is really good into the mirror, right? Like, where you're both not pressuring each other early in the game. So you could, if you have a turn 3 Feast, that feels really good. It's so much better than a turn 3 Angel's Egg in the mirror specifically. But if you're facing down a aggro Steam Druid or some other aggressive deck, and you draw Feast for Crows on turn 3, and you have nothing else to do, and you're looking at 2 other minions on board ready to punch you for 6 or 7 on turn 4, Feast for Crows is a dead card.
Yeah, you can't afford to cast it too early. Like, you need to have a clear board before you can afford to cast it. And ideally, you want to double cast it because you might want to immediately get rid of something in your opponent's hand.
Yeah.
But yeah, trying to keep that section small because this is how you lose game if you draw too many of these cards that do only one thing very early on. And so the section should be like threats only and silver bullets, something like that. Basically cards that don't offer anything else.
Yeah. I think, well, maybe we can add more to this, like, threats only category once we go through archetypes. Do you want to go to archetypes or like overall strategies with Magoo, or maybe we can talk specifically to each archetype's overall strategy, if that makes sense?
Yeah, we can do strategy. That makes sense.
So I personally see Archimago at the top tier as 3 different types. One is a mid-range package, one is a token package, and one is full control. In the early, right when AL launched, Archimago seemed to have like the burn plan, but that was quickly moved on from. But right now, I see 3 main archetypes for Archimago. Any arguments there, or like any different ideas you see through the archetypes of Archimago?
No, I think that's correct. I think in the lists that we use to represent the 3 archetypes, you can argue there's probably an air earth as well, but it probably rolls up into probably into this archetype or the full control one.
Yeah, I think air earth is probably
just slightly different elements.
Yeah, Air Earth is can either play the mid range like package or the full control package. Like you just drop the couple fire cards and you slot in some more cantrips or another earthquake or something, kind of like. But they would both be very similar lists to the mid range and full control list, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, my personal favorite archetype of Archimago, if I had to pick one, is mid range. This general, this is the one I play a lot and have more practice on. This one allows me to do the Archamago control thing, but also try to turn the corner a little bit sooner than full control. Sometimes that bites me in the butt, but sometimes it just kind of runs over my opponents. The next one is Kyle's or Scourge Altar's tokens list. I haven't played a whole lot with this, but this seems he seems to do pretty good with it. 45-2 in league matches. I'll let you talk about this when we get there. And then your personal like list that you do really well with is the full control list, playing the Chains of Prometheus, and dropping vampires for some more magics and or control pieces. Where would you like to start, sir?
Whichever. We can start with yours if you want.
Okay. So, like the overall strategy with the mid range list, Moth is also a big proponent of the mid range list, just because it kills people sometimes. Like if you get to turn 6 and your opponent is out of resources, or they just play a Violent and pass or something, and you have a vampire, you can just start beating down with vampires. But overall, the first things I'm looking for in this list, and this will probably be going through a lot of Archimagos generally, is the Mulligan. I want something early to do, so that's a cantrip, that's a random lightning bolt, it's a common sense, having a turn 2 kettle top feels really good. Something to do on turn 2 is very important. What do you generally look for in your mulligans?
Yeah, I mean, I think pretty similar, right? And actually, if you flip between my list, which is a bit more on the control side and fewer minions, and your list, they're actually very similar, right? Like you're really talking about 5 or 6 cards that change. I think your package, if we want to like circle around it, is the 3 vampire, the titan, and the grapple shot, right? And they come as like, and I guess the gigantism as well. They come as a package of like 6 cards that, you know, if you add the vampire, then yeah, grapple shot is really, really good, and the gigantism gets better, etc. But I think our lists are actually very, very similar, and in the way we mulligan, probably look for the same thing. We want early cantrip to get the engine a little bit going. Love to see a leprechaun. Like basically, you want to play something on turn 2, which is usually a cantrip or a leprechaun. For me, I try and fish for one of the mass removal, Poison Nova, Earthquake. I think for you, it's probably the same, but you also have the option to go for just dropping a vampire on turn 5, and that might be good enough to stabilize you.
Sometimes it's not the best thing to be doing in turn 5. Sometimes I want to remove things, but I mean that's the price of playing just an extra, what is it, 3 minions? 2 minions, like it is very similar. The other thing we're probably both looking for is a turn 2 pebble pass or bridge. We used to play free cities, but since the nerf, they are out of here. But they were even gone before the nerf. Especially in this 3-colored list, you'll notice we have annual fairs. Annual fairs do so much work. It's nuts. I've seen some lists go to 3 annual fairs. Maybe I think Kyle's list has 3. Yeah, 3 annual fairs. Just because he's so threshold heavy. Look at all these like 3 and 4 mana or threshold cost cards. Annual fair just fixes all of that. He also has 2 Value of Delight. I think he's also playing not so many defensive sites. Like he still has the Pebble Pass and Gnome Hollows, but he doesn't have the Perilous Bridge because he's not in air. So yeah, the defensive sites are good, but they're not fully necessary in Archimago.
You can do without it. I think he has access to more tokens, so in the way we prevent damage through an extra 2 defensive sides in our version, he has access to more early tokens. So, I mean, obviously he's doing very well with it. So obviously there's a way to compensate the lack of the 2 extra defensive sites.
So after mulligans, how do you handle site placement? This is also a very hard thing for people to learn. And site placement with Archimago is where you will lose. You will like, how did I lose? I was doing the Archimago thing and I was removing minions. Generally, site placement is where you can start to look to improve your game. Any tips on where to place sites?
Yeah, I think the only main call out, I think one of the really important thing for Archimago is try to get your defensive sites up on the second row to do their thing best. That means if you're not pressured to play on location 8 or 13, so basically the one location just in front of you, you don't have to just yet. You can wait and fish for potentially a more like a better defensive side if you don't have one, or something else. You'll have to play there pretty early, because let's say you're on the draw, your opponent goes, sight under their feet, then sight just immediately in front of them. You never want to let them grab the space in front of you, like 99% of the cases. So basically, when they're getting ready to invade onto your side of the board, that's when you have to drop it. But let's say you're on the play, maybe your second side can go sideways, because maybe you'll get to see another side, and maybe that side is going to be the better one just in front of you on location 13 on your screen. So, and the sites we're looking for on 13 are going to be the Perilous Bridge, as you mentioned, the Pebble Path. It's an excellent place for Pebble Path to be. But also the Gnome Hollow, right? Like, if it needs to be a Gnome Hollow on 13, I'm happy, especially against some of the decks. I can present a 4-power minion very, very early. And we used to have more defensive site options, as you mentioned. Free City, I mean, I wasn't playing them, but I know some lists could afford it. That's no longer an option, really, with the rules changes. And then Quagmire was one of my personal favorite, and again, has been really gutted, so I'm a bit sad for that one. Quagmire.
I think 2 days or 3 days before the rules change, we were talking about Quagmire, and I had cut just the bottom 2 sites just barely and shoved in 2 Quagmires, and I was like, Quagmires are going to be so good. And man, the rules change just took the wind out of my sails. It was like, oh no, I just tweet. It's like,
Yeah, the beauty of Quagmire before was that it was a defensive site that did not compete for the same location as your other defensive sites, right? Like 12, 13, and 14, that's where you want to see your Gnome Hollows, your Perilous Bridge, your Pebble Path. And so if you drew another like bridge, hollow, etc., once you had 12, 13, and 14, like it felt a bit wasted. Quagmire, however, its best location are 17 or 19. Like, they get to protect your things proactively once you've kind of played the first 4 turns. And that's no longer a thing, because now with the rules changes, they can attack into it. Whereas before, it would they could come onto your sites protected by Quagmire, but it would cancel the attack. So sad times.
So, with site placement, we were talking about where to place sites. Hypothetically, if I'm the Archamago player on the play, and my opening hand is, if I can draw cards, I play Quagmire or some turn 1 play. This is where you have to play turn 2. Somebody plays there. I'm on the play, so I'm not really incentivized to play to 13 quite yet, because my opponent won't get there before I can get there. So what I do on the play a lot of the time is play to my left or right, and this also helps prevent a Rift Valley turn 2.
Yeah, so Rift Valley is one. Obviously, not all decks are going to have it, and it's still an elite, so sometimes you want to develop your defensive side and you'll still play on 13. But the other reason you might want to do the sideway play is because you might not have seen your defensive side yet. And so instead of putting down a pyre or a dual site on 13 that is going to be exposed, maybe you can play on 19, and then if you cantrip, or if you're willing to draw a site for turn next turn, that you get the chance to draw a defensive site that you can play on 13. So it really depends on the texture of your hand and the other sites that are available to you. But playing sideways can give you more time to get the right sites to put on 13, 12, and 14, essentially.
Yeah, so on the play, I can draw, like my second turn, I can draw a site and hypothetically draw a Gnome Halls that I haven't seen yet. I could have mulliganed 2 sites and drawn one more site, so I'm now 3 or 4 sites deep. And now that's where your defensive sites is. If I have my hand is Gothic Tower and Pyre on turn 2, I don't really want to play either of these forward. These are open sites, so that's when I really would want to play to the right on the play and draw a site. And maybe my 4th site or something is now my Gnome Halls. In this scenario, my defensive sites are looking really strong.
Yeah, and I would say don't overdo it on drawing sites to get the perfect defensive site, the perfect location. But generally, I'll always try to hit my first 5 land drop on the first 5 turns, right? And so if I have cantrips, I can draw me sites, or if I have leprechauns, that means I might only need to draw a site for turn once on top of my 3 initial sites, because I'm going to get a 5th one from the leprechaun or something. But if I don't have any of these, maybe you'll need to draw 2 sites for turn. In which case, you want to see them as early as possible, assuming you can still use your mana with the spells that you have in hand, because then you can truly lay out the best site structure, knowing what your initial 5 sites are going to be, right?
And I think that's where I've also felt a little like tension as playing as Archamago. I'm pretty good at if I'm on the play, my turn 2 or 3, I will draw a site. So then I have 4 sites in, I don't want to say in hand, but I can play 4 sites without drawing another site or being too worried about it. But a lot of the times I will get to turn 5 and I don't have a site in hand, and it's like I really needed another site before this. Maybe that's something I can work on, and getting to 5 consistently and without having to tap and be a turn behind, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it depends on the matchup and the board, right? If they're not putting pressure on you and you can afford to do that, then maybe that's better. It leaves you with more cards overall. But I find that in most matchup, I want my 5 for 5 ready. And because 5 unlocks so much, like Poison Nova, Earthquake, etc. And you feel a little bit better after that. It's also, usually you'll want to at least protect your territory with this T formation so that you're not losing too much real estate in terms of how many sites you're going to be able to put down in the whole game. If you start skipping on sites just to get your card advantage up, then your opponent can start and invade a bit more, and it gets tricky. You might be blocked on 7 or 8 mana if you're not careful.
So if we kind of restart the flow here, so if I'm on the play, I tap, play a site, my opponent plays a site, I play my second site, he plays up.
Yeah. And in between, on your second turn, you might have then draw the site for turn and see what your options look like as a result, right?
Yeah.
And then, I'll do the same. I'll obviously move up because I'm the aggressive deck in this matchup. And that's when really you have to play.
Yeah, so now even if I didn't have a defensive site, I have to play here. There's no option to not play here.
It's too risky, I think. Again, it will depend on certain matchups. If you're... It feels very risky regardless of matchup, to be honest. But there might be some fringe cases where it's okay. The main reason is, if you let me have access to your avatar, it enables a lot of cards like Phylums and Kobolds to do their job immediately. And it gives me better options to cut you off.
Yeah, so I've found myself in scenarios like this. So if I'm going second or something, I play right here as my second turn because I'm afraid of a turn 2 cat or something. I was like, oh god, I don't want to get punched for 4 on turn 2. So I, out of fear, sometimes I I play to 19. But then if we play this out a little bit longer, he could play to 9, and I played at 15. But now he can cut me off here. So now I only have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Now the max I can get to without Earthquake is 7 mana. And Archimago, you really need to get to 8. So not giving up this site will screw you over in the long game. So you can't be scared.
I think if you let your opponent take the space in front of you, you're giving them too much agency to shape the realm however they want.
Yeah.
I could play here, and then I can immediately try and cut you off here, which you may or may not let me, but eventually you'll need to develop this way. And it's much harder for you to defend like a column than it is a row, right?
Yeah. So
if you think about spells like Poison Nova, etc., if you have to play a side here, it's becoming harder for you to defend that.
Hypothetically, if this is like how the board develops, I have, and these aren't Gnome Hollows, this is some other site, and call it a Pyre or something. Now he has an avenue to attack that Archamago cannot defend nicely. And maybe I don't have a blink, or I don't have some movement spell to get here, so my Poison Novas are really hurting. As an Archamago player, this is like where site placement is so hard for people to learn, because this site placement is so bad compared to, if we just kind of like go back to a more ideal scenario, like this is so much easier to defend. I'm nearby my sites with Poison Novas or Earthquakes now like work really well. If I'm against a Steam or Water deck, I want him to be on my site so my Earthquakes and Berry effects work. If I'm like this and out of position, he has a really good attack surface. And so this is where site placement matters a lot. I'm trying to think of another scenario where, like,
ideally, you want to give, if your opponent plays, like, let's grab a random minion that is not a minion. This one, right? Like, ideally, if your opponent plays a minion here, or here, or here, like on any location, if they only have one location of yours that they can attack, it makes it so much easier for your cards like Root Spider, etc. Whereas if we did some weird stuff where, you let me take this, and then let's say you build around me, right? Like, let's say you do a U shape like this for some reason. Then if I'm here, then I have 3 options, right? Mm-hmm. And it makes things like Root Spider, etc.
It's like, what do I do with my Root Spider? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
So a lot of, like you were saying, giving your opponent one avenue to attack. So if we put this back and put a Gnome Hollows here, and I have a Root Spider in hand at some point, and I can play Root Spider here, I've funneled my opponent this way into one attack surface.
Yeah.
This is where the control aspect of Archamago feels so hard to deal with, because they have funneled you now into one section, and this is one section to defend. Hypothetically, I can move over and Lightning Bolt or Magic Missiles or some other removal spell and deal with maybe multiple minions here.
Yeah, no, exactly. Again, we can't interact in our opponent's turn, so the best we can do is limit their options of things they can do in their turn. And if any minion, the Manticore is not a good example because it has airborne, so it actually has more avenues. I don't want to take a charge minion either because it's like Kaliki. Kaliki's great in the sense that they're very bad.
I like Kalikis. Don't knock Kalikis.
No, they're good, but like we were chatting with Felix, and they're probably the worst in the Student Druid list. Yeah. And well, because again, like they don't have charge. So if I play Kaliki, you know exactly what are my options with that Kaliki, and it's attacking the space right in front of me. If I don't have multiple options to attack, can't really trick you, surprise you, and so you have plenty of time to prepare for it. It could be you put a spider down, and that completely blocks the Kaliki, or it could be that you're willing to let me attack a specific site because you have one of those cards like Earthquake or Poison Nova, where you know that by me stacking on specifically one site because it's the only one available, you can then turn this into your advantage, basically.
Yeah. So like, if this is the the layout where I don't have 2 defensive sites, I only have 1. I've used Root Spider to now push him over here to attack my 12th site. Say he attacks and plays, what's another minion? How about a Lugbog Cat? Technically doesn't work, but whatever. There we go. So now he attacks for 3, or we're middle in the game or something. I'm at 5 mana. Now it's on my turn. I've funneled him over here, and I can just walk up and Poison Nova and get a 2-for-1. This is the power of funneling your opponents into one section.
Yeah, it could also be that like you draw a second spider and then immediately you block this one and a second option. Like there's so many ways you can benefit from your opponent being packed into one area specifically. That
So then if we go back to this weird site placement that I don't know, like you come into this position and you're like this and you're all spread out as Archimago.
Yeah, so like I'll try and threaten here a little bit. I'll try and threaten, like, let's say, I mean, I don't know if this would be your site, but yeah, I'll try to like spread you out a lot more than before.
Yeah.
And it's going to be harder for you to defend, right?
Yeah, and so this is like I could have played Root Spider in this scenario. Play another site. Played Root Spider in the scenario, and now I'm still very spread out. I'm like, okay, I'm taking 3, sure. But what happens if he removes my Root Spider? Now it's like if I didn't have Poison Nova, maybe I had a Earthquake. Or even what I love is the auras. Like now my auras or my earthquakes only can hit 1 minion. Poison Nova being the outlier here, just because Poison Nova is a broken card, but whatever. Sometimes you don't have Poison Novas, and these like 2x2 removal spells are very hard to keep your opponents like contained. So funneling your opponents is very important to do as Archimago and control in general in Sorcery. Win cons. How about win cons?
Yeah, so I think we briefly mentioned it when we talked about some of the card breakdown right back categories. So I think the beauty of Archimago is many of the win cons you have are actually cards that do something else for you. So I'm not going to go to like the win-only cards, that is the last category, but if we look at survival or removal, the category, then you'll see cards that earlier in the game allow you to survive or to remove some of your opponent's stuff, but later in the game can become some of your damage cards. So Dapper Vampire is one. All the token makers are win cons.
Should we put Kettle Top in the win condition too?
I mean, they do damage. Look,
yeah.
When you stabilize the board, and you're obviously going to be up on cards against your opponent just because you have access to your graveyard. Sometimes just a Leprechaun, they're not going to want to deal with it because it doesn't seem that scary, but the damage stacks up so quickly. So Leprechaun is net ring. Sorry, we actually didn't touch about the.
Oh yeah, we can talk about
the OP category, but the ring was always going to have its own category because it does multiple things. It does the survival, it does the removal, it does the threat, and so it's like Leprechaun in the sense that they belong in 3+ categories, which is insane. And then if we switch to the removal list, removal in Archimago is. You can basically split it into 2 categories. You have the damage-based removal, and the beauty of these is when you're ready, when you no longer need to remove things, you can just go face with them. So fireballs, lightning bolts, magic missile, even chaos twister. I'd even put infiltrate in this category in a weird way because it's removal that later on you can cash in and turn into damage, and then craterize. So all of these cards, their main function is not to kill your opponent, but they can. And that's what's so great, is that you can just... The same card will do the different things depending on what stage of the game you are in.
What I need to get better at is, like, if I don't have a a mid-range win condition, so like Vampire, Death Dealer, or some other minion to punch them down, is Lightning Bolt or Magic Missiles plus Ring
Yeah.
is 4
Yeah.
damage. So then, hypothetically, you can Lightning Bolt for 2, ping them for with Ring, heal 1, and you've dealt 4. But then Archimago
Yeah.
can banish Lightning Bolt and ping them with Ring and deal 8 in a turn. And you probably have more stuff you can do with the Ring and cantrips and common sense for common sense. You can ping things for 2 and then Lightning Bolt and then do more damage that way. So, like you were saying, Lightning Bolt and these 3 mana or 3 damage spells, yeah, it deals 3 damage, but they quickly go, oh, I'm dealing 8 to you this turn. What happened?
Yeah. I mean, being able to like double cast all of these later on make them actual threats. If you could ever really cast 2 bolts and 2 missiles, they probably wouldn't be considered a win con necessarily, right? Because it doesn't get you there. It gets you 12 damage total. But the fact that this can be 24 in Archimago, right? Very easily. And if you have a ring, it's a lot more than that. And these are cards that you can grab off of common sense. So whenever you're ready to turn the corner and start going face, and it's available to you.
Would you say common sense
Obviously,
is a win condition card?
well, not necessarily, but
Yeah,
bolts and missiles and etc. And border militia, right? Credit Rise is obviously in this category. That's probably the one card that people would think about when we talk win cons. And I would say most of the time, you are at the stage in the game when it's turn 8 that like you just go face with it. But sometimes it's a removal first card and it just deals a bit of damage, right? So it is also
There's
multimodal.
been multiple games when I've just like had to like align it up so that I could remove 2 minions and hit my opponent for 4 or something like that.
Yeah.
But like it was a 2-for-1 and I dealt damage.
Yeah. If you have to choose, I think it's removal first. Like there's no point taking risks, right? You remove the Credit Rise is going to be in your graveyard for you to recast. Remove the minions first, and you'll be fine. And then we have the like threats only card. So Gigantism is one. And then if you're in a a tokens list, then you have Boudican, Ruler of Thule. And these are win cons, right? Like they either turn your other cards into massive damage.
The other thing that, if we go to the spice list, there's 2 infiltrates here that I did once, and Kyle says that does a lot. Since Sing Druid is very popular, a lot of people are also playing their own Boudicas. So infiltrate just becomes I get your Boudica, and I have tokens as well. So like it's infiltrate can also be like a win condition.
Yeah, absolutely. So the beauty of Infiltrate is it's a removal that you can cash in later for damage, right? Like when you're ready for it. It's great. Obviously, it has counterplay if they have any kind of like anti-stealth. And so personally, I can't afford to run them because I play Chains of Prometheus. And stealing a minion for it to be tapped forever is not particularly interesting to me.
Yep.
But it's a card I would play if I wasn't on Chains. It's just a sacrifice I had to make for Chains.
But I think that's very important to say. Like, yeah, my mid-range package and your full control list, they are very similar decks. But the fact that you have 2 chains means you have to play differently.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can't afford to play Vampire because, like, if I drop a Chains on 4 and I draw a Vampire, it's like, great, I just killed my own card. So I can't play Vampires. I can't play any of the big guys. You'll see Death Dealer and Nimbus in this list, but to be honest, I think in my more recent list, both of these are cut, so I'm even lighter on minions.
Oh, wow. I
Yeah.
knew Jin was cut, but I didn't expect Death Dealer to be cut. But interesting.
It's just, yeah, I go back and forth on Death Dealer. The problem if you have Chains on is like, yes, you'll kill everything, but then your Death Dealer never attacks because Chains taps it down. And I had to make room for some other stuff more recently, and so I'm willing to cut Death Dealer.
That's fair. I also I put Death Dealer in the win condition because there's a lot of games where I play Death Dealer in 7, wipe the board of 2 minions or something, and my opponent plays a chump block of a Violent or their own Kettle Top or just something that's small, and Death Dealer can eat that, or if I have a Gigantism, Death Dealer plus Gigantism is 10 damage right off the rip, and maybe I have a grapple shot in my yard from earlier in the game or something. So I feel like Death Dealer can help you
All of
turn
those
back the card.
cards, all of those cards that let you survive, but when you're ready to no longer be just surviving and actually attacking are great. And Death Dealer does exactly that literally every time because it first kills everything.
Yes.
And then
Yes.
it makes its own path clear, which is great.
Yeah. Oh, we have a CJ. CJ, what do you think of Archimago?
Oh no.
Oh, he's going to be on a walk with his dogs.
Or a
Well,
quiet
Geoffrey,
shift.
what what else would you say about Archimago? I think the one thing we didn't touch on is in the mirror. Funeral Pyre is very, very strong. Timing a Funeral Pyre. Don't get greedy with it. If you hit a blink in a common sense, that's more than enough for a Funeral Pyre to be good, in my opinion.
Yeah, this is one where if you're playing a very experienced Archimago, like against a very experienced Archimago, they'll see it coming. They'll see that like, oh, there's a site that they kept in their opening hand and they haven't been willing to play it the whole time. And whenever they'll give you a juicy spell, they'll immediately recast it, like the same turn they play the first copy,
It's like
just so that you don't get
browse. Like
Funeral Pyre vibe.
browse is
Yeah,
never living in
exactly.
my graveyard. It's like it's double browse in a turn usually.
Yeah, so don't feel bad if you have to grab a common sense in the blink early on because you might not have more than that, to be honest.
Yeah. Um, yeah. Then I will have some. I'll just try to find some gameplay and examples to go over what we did here. Yeah, we had some hypotheticals, but hypotheticals only work go so far. Um, yeah.
Yeah, the mirror match is one I get a lot of questions about. It's like, oh, what do you do in the mirror match? Like, do you craterize and then they just heal, and then you craterize again and they just heal? It's like, yeah, sometimes that's how it goes. But I think card advantage is the key to the mirror match. And so I think what you're looking for are either very specific key spells that like drastically accelerate you towards the good stuff. And to supplement that, a lot of cantrips so that you can recast the good stuff. And by the good stuff, I mean Feast for Crow's absolute MVP in the mirror match. Like the first person that can Feast for Crow their opponent twice usually wins.
I
If you're in a good
imagine.
position,
I imagine Feast for
yeah,
Crows usually goes for Divine Healing first, and then depending what's in their hand, maybe something in their hand, and then Craterize. If you're like both on the full control list, and you go like, ooh, there
yeah.
goes some win conditions, right?
Depends on the texture of the game. If it's like pretty late into the game and you have a lot of like damage in your hand, and you think like, oh, if Divine Healing is not on the table and I kill him in 2 turns, like, yeah, they might have an egg, but like I easily outrace the egg, then you definitely go for Divine Healing. If you're on the back foot, and you think they're like massively ahead, then maybe you go for the big damage spells and you're like, oh, I'll get them eventually. If they don't have Craterize or Arcane Barrage or something, then I don't see how I lose. It is pretty rare that you go that route, just because the Archimago deck lists have so many ways to kill you now. It used to be very concentrated in like Craterize and Arcane Barrage, and now you have to consider, oh, there's Craterize, there's the tokens, there's, oh, what if they're on the Vampire package, etc. And so it might be easier to just go for healing almost all of the time and just trust that you can start going face then.
That's what I feel like I would run into a lot with the mirror is, yeah, I can punch you to get you to 12 or something, but then Divine Healings just negate most of that, any progress I have
Yeah.
made. So the other
Yeah,
thing I
I
wanted to
mean,
talk about is not specific matchups, but just more kind of generally matchups in for Archimago. I'm trying to find a land destruction list here for Pathfinder, but Steam Druid. I know Felix is a very good Steam Druid player. What's your take against the Steam Druid list?
Yeah, it depends a bit on which Archimago list you run. I think it's pretty favored for Archimago generally. I think specifically, hmm, I think at least my list feels very favored for me.
Yeah.
If you can survive the early game, it's going to be really hard for them to come back from that, unless they can hit a combination of busted uniques, which, to be fair, is what this deck is supposed to do, Steam Droid, right? But I find that because I don't have any ways to interact with auras or non-held or unheld artifacts, things like chains of Prometheus are very hard for them to deal with. The auras they really can't interact with either. And if you have the right defensive side set up, they're not going to be able to break through too early, and it's going to be really hard for them to close the game. I would be, I'd be a bit more careful if you're on the vampire list because they run things like disintegrate, sometimes infiltrates, etc. And so they can actually turn these cards against you very quickly.
I've been blown out by a couple disintegrates. Those were very frustrating, especially with Tawny like bouncing around. It's like you could never play him safely.
That's right.
Another one that I wanted to talk about is the Air Earth mid range like aggro decks, like Battle Mage and Avatar of Earth. We have the thing I run into as the aggressive avatar list is I need blockers, so a lot of the border militia and guards feel really good against like an Avatar of Earth trying to like get on my site and punch me for a bunch. If I can have a bunch of blockers, it feels like I can kind of survive for a lot longer.
Yeah, I think any avatar that can hit like pretty hard with their face is scary for Archimago because a lot of your cards are geared towards dealing with minions, right? So what do you do when you have an Avatar of Earth that's like hitting for 7 every turn because you play Earth and so you give them a couple of Earth sites? Generally, I think in these matchups, the sites are super, super critical. And I'd be willing to mulligan even more aggressively towards sites than spells in these games to be able to hit the Gnome Hollow, the Perilous Bridge, etc. Like any kind of speed bump you can give them just through your site is going to be extremely valuable.
Yeah.
And then the tokens can help you in a pinch. It's a bit awkward if Battle Mages and Screaming Skull, they get to draw a lot, but you know, if that means you live, that means you live.
Living is the most important thing early.
Yeah.
What other Pathfinder Land Destruction we did see a good amount of play earlier. It's kind of like fallen off. The thing I found to deal with it the most is don't burn disintegrates, or not disintegrates, dispels willy-nilly. So you can get one of their auras, and then if they do drop one of the big 7 mana aura, always having a common sense or a dispel at hand, you have to answer that aura or else you're just going to get blown out.
Yeah, it's a great call out. It's not only for Pathfinder side destruction. I would just say, if you know roughly how many of the aura threats you need to answer from your opponents, be wary and be a bit greedy with your dispel, because like I'll take Steam Druid as an example, just because I've played against so many of them at Sorcery Fest. I had one really good Steam Druid player play against me that actually baited me into playing my dispel for the auras that were less relevant for him, and kept Atlantean Fate as like the one thing that I couldn't remove because I had burned my dispel on a jihad. And to be fair, burning it on a jihad feels like good. The right choice.
Like,
right?
That's like, yeah, you don't want them to like Violent, Border Horse, Dragonette, like dump a bunch of things on your side of the board. So jihad is a threat, but if it's really a bait for Atlantean Fate to blow you out of your Earth or Air threshold or whatever it is, it can be very strong too.
Yeah, and so I think first cast was Jihad, second cast was Ring, and he was on a water side, so Bury were not an option. And so I was like, yeah, I'll dispel a Ring. Yeah, I'll dispel a Jihad. And then he was like, great, that's exactly what I wanted you to do, Atlantean Fate. And I didn't have an answer anymore.
Very nice.
So fair play to him. So it's not specific to Pathfinder side destruction, but it's the one that will blow you out the most. Because if you lose 4 sides, you've probably lost the game.
Yeah. Last final tips about winning or losing with Archimago. I find myself I lose really early in the game, just getting swarmed before I can get to 5 mana or 4 mana plus a tower to like clear the board. And another one is mid to late game. Now with the new rules changes, the Grimgus Arms and Mask of Mayhem double strikes, the possibility of getting doored from 20 is a very real threat now.
Yeah, and that's scary. And I think that requires the Archimago players to make some changes to their lists. Because before, if you were on an empty board, you were fine.
Mm-hmm.
And now there are some decks that can kill you from an empty board just by playing spells from hands. And obviously, they'll need 2 or 3 very specific cards. But because you're not going to kill them that quickly on Archimago, at least on my list, your list might do better at that.
Yeah.
I'm going to give them plenty of time to draw into the perfect 3 or 2. And yeah, I know that personally I had to make changes because I've had Avatar of Earth just on a side where they can hit for 5. And from an empty board, they went, Gizarm, hit you for 20. I'm like, oh, okay.
Yeah, no, I like the mid-range package in that sense because I can do that maybe turn 6, I can do a little bit of pressure and maybe they have to use a removal spell. All right, cool. My thing is gone, but maybe they had to use a grapple shot to do so, and that's maybe one of the cards that they need to do that big 20 or 15 in a turn. So if they're using that, I'm happy.
Yeah, and it's something that we'll have to get used to. We were not used to like being able to randomly die out of nowhere.
Yeah.
Some people have feelings about playing in a meta where you can just die out of nowhere. But I get why maybe they haven't acted on Archimago if they knew that like the rule changes were coming, and that could potentially be pretty big shakeup to the meta. Time will tell. I don't think we know just yet, but
yeah, it's a real threat. We'll see how it shakes out, but I think that's about an hour and a half of Archimago conversation. I'll see how I can edit this together, but thank you, Geoffrey. Thank you for joining. Thank you for the tips. Yeah, hopefully people can either get better or like learn how to play against Archimago more going into this.
thanks for having me.
All right. Thanks, everybody. I'll see you next time.